Hello and welcome to Bury Our Bones with Cinema, the podcast that lives, breathes and dies classic movies, not so classic movies and everything in between. In today's festive theme episode, I'm joined by the Cat Stevens to my Cat Slater, the Ernie Wise to my Eric Morecambe, the wonderful Mr. Simon Keet. In today's episode, we have the house all to ourselves with Christopher Columbus's Die Hard for Kids, Home Alone. So join us as we run away from an overly creepy neighbour, terrorise pizza delivery boys, and finally ask Joe Pesci if he is, after all, a funny guy.
Visit the Macaulay Culkin Tangerine Emporium for all your citrus fruit needs. Visit us in-store to peruse our limitless supply of Burmese citrus fruits, plus browse our selection of Lunchables. Or shop online using discount code I Bloody Told You to receive a 10% discount on our lean, mean tangerine machine for all your juicing needs. That's the Macaulay Culkin Tangerine Emporium, Bond Street, London, England. We have tangerines the size of rubies.
So it is Christmas time, and I don't think you can have Christmas without what, to be honest, for me, is the ultimate Christmas film in 1990s Home Alone.
Sore subject, but my ultimate Christmas movie is probably a Jingle All the Way. I know Jim wasn't into that one.
He wasn't into that, and I that's not the reason he's not on the episodes at current. Although that is the last one we done together, and
really?
I do feel as though it did leave a sore taste in the mouth.
Yeah. No, I mean obviously this is Home Alone. It's totally different territory to that.
But it's not at the same time. So Chris Columbus worked on Jingle All the Way, so it had a lot of the same components. And in Jim's eyes, he couldn't quite work out why it didn't work for him.
Yeah.
But I think. There are certain Christmas films that when you think of Christmas films you think of them, for a lot of people It's a Wonderful Life, for a lot of people Home Alone, for a lot of people Miracle on 34th Street, Die Hard is another one, absolutely. So can you remember the first time you saw this film?
No,
or any particular fond memories?
I don't have a clue, to be honest. I just rewatching it because I've not watched this for ages for whatever reason, and rewatching it sort of triggers my. I remember the lens of what I saw it through when I was a kid. Like I couldn't quite. I never realised that the furnace was in his imagination. I thought it was just doing that. You know what I mean? When I was a kid and the furnace downstairs is just making all that weird stuff, I just thought, oh, he doesn't like going down there because there's that furnace keeps doing really weird stuff. And I also didn't realise when I was younger that quite an obvious thing is that Macaulay Culkin, Kevin, he really does believe he made his family disappear, and that's why he's not gone to the police and stuff. He did. I always thought when I remembered this film, I thought, oh yeah, his family leave him, and he must realise his family left him to go on holiday. But he really just thinks it's so cool. He really thinks he made his family disappear, and he's just acting as if they're potentially going to come back or not, and he's just picking up the shopping.
For a film that has a rather far-fetched plot, it does do a very good job of providing reasoning as to why certain things don't happen, as you just said. The fact he doesn't go to the cops or even say anything to his neighbours is because in his head he made a wish.
It's his fault almost.
And I think you said you watched this the other day through the lens of when you watched it when you were younger. And I kind of done the same thing. And I think we've probably all been in that position, a lot of us have been in that position where we've had an argument with mum, dad, or sister, brother, or cousins, whatever it may be. We've had an argument, and in your head, or you say it out loud, you kind of, I wish you weren't here, or something to that effect. So I think we can, for the vast majority of people, we can all identify with that kind of, feeling of, and then if it was to actually happen, where you woke up one morning and they weren't there, I think as a kid you probably would do exactly what you'd be like, this is great, and then slowly you'd be like, oh, not so great actually.
It's when the macaroni. I always remember like the macaroni. He's about to have that macaroni cheese, and he never gets to touch it,
which is just such a waste,
But yeah, so I think I have no idea when I first watched this movie. I guess it's always been there. Feels like, and I feel like I could probably find my way around his house. You know what I mean? Because you know his house well. What about you?
So I have real sort of fond nostalgic memories with this film. So my uncle and auntie, and sadly my uncle's no longer with us, when we were kids they used to live a fair bit away from us, so where we didn't see them all the time. But when we did go to their house, I think they only had like a couple of films that were appropriate for kids, and the two films were Mrs. Doubtfire and Home Alone. And for some reason, I never wanted to watch Mrs. Doubtfire. I had only ever watched Home Alone. So every time I went up to my uncle and auntie's, we put Home Alone on, regardless of what time of year it was. Or at least that's my kind of, my child warped kind of rose-tinted glasses memories of this film. And so for me, it always has a fond place in my heart, and I won't have a bad word said about it. And it is, every time I watch it, it just takes me back to the, quite vividly sitting in the front room of my uncle and auntie's house watching it, and them going, why don't you put Mrs. Doubtfire on this time? And me going, no, I want to watch Home Alone again.
I love that it was just two options all the time.
I know, and it's weird because I don't know why I never wanted to watch Mrs. Doubtfire, because I've subsequently seen it in later years, and it's great.
For me, that movie's a bit too tense. I
mean, there's a lot more. It's certainly, because it's interesting because it both has quite what's the word I'm looking for? The family issues in the families in those two films are can be taken very kind of real, and being slightly older and having worked in a job where I look at a lot of social care files, I watched Home Alone the other day and was like, well, they definitely have social workers around the very next day asking some serious questions as to how you left your 8-year-old son at home.
No one in this world seems to care, though. Like, the police don't care. They're all snowed in. Like, they're all a bit too busy. So I don't think no one knows. For some reason in this scenario that no one wants to... They call the police, and it doesn't really... watching it as a kid, you're mostly interested in whatever's going on with Kevin, and I remember getting very bored. All the with the guys with the yellow jackets in it. Who are they? I don't understand. What's polka? Do you know what I mean? You know what I mean?
That was actually something I totally forgot about.
What, the yellow jackets?
I totally forgot about that. John Candy and the brass band. I totally forgot about them. Like, if you were to say to me before I watched this the other day, name some Home Alone scenes, I would never have remembered those scenes. I think maybe because it probably as a kid, they come into it sort of like definitely at the beginning of the third act, and so I could imagine I would have been
asleep by then.
By that point, I was getting a bit sleepy. Probably
you were done.
Well, probably because where they lived, I think they lived in Guildford. So from here, that's about an hour and 10. So when you're 5, 6, 7, an hour in the car with your parents. I mean, not for any international listeners, particularly people from America, where that's a short journey. But in England, that's quite a long journey. And so
I love that you relate those yellow jackets to being tired. That's probably why I had like a feeling, and it's like, it's those guys. Like, I obviously love John Candy's great, and those scenes are pretty good, but yeah, something there's I had an intuitive feeling. I remember being bored of that, and it might not have been boredom. It might have just been that I was a bit tired, like you say, because you were watching it quite young, and I mean the whole so Kevin's obviously doing all his antics and stuff, having a great time. I mean, how do you feel about the plot, the other plot with the mum trying to get home? They've gone to Paris. They've gone to France, haven't they? And they remember him. She remembers him on the plane. She goes, Kevin,
in that iconic Kevin.
Oh, yeah.
Catherine O'Hara will always be Kevin's mum.
Yeah.
I think if you go back and listen to our Beetlejuice episode, we spent the whole time referring to her as Kevin's mum rather than Catherine O'Hara. So apologies to Catherine O'Hara directly. Recently had a bit of a resurgence with Schitt's Creek.
Oh yeah, that I've watched a bit of that. It was.
So she obviously is more than just Kevin's mum, but to me and to probably a lot of people, she is Kevin's mum.
She's great as Kevin's mum.
Yeah, she. I think, as I say, like you could watch it through the lens of, like what I said, half jokingly. There are some serious safeguarding issues at play in this film. However, the fact that it's we can see that they didn't do it because they don't care. There are some points where it's a bit borderline. Like my everlasting kind of thought, having watched it recently, was that Uncle Frank is a prick. Like he's like the like. I can never imagine any of my uncles standing up saying, "Look what you did, you little jerk!"
Yeah,
like that would lit. And if it did, my dad or my mum would pretty much be up there and be like, "You don't talk to my son like that." So I mean, that whole scene where at the dinner time where everybody is like on Kevin's case,
he just wants his cheese and tomato cheese pizza.
I think part of the reason why this film works so well is I think we can all identify with that feeling. Maybe more so if you've got brothers and sisters. If you're an only child, maybe something at school or something. I mean, we can all identify with that feeling of everybody having it in for you and everybody blaming you when actually you've not really done anything wrong. I think we can all identify with that. But watching it back yesterday was really difficult because I was just like, so unfair. It's not Kevin's fault.
But how I see it a bit more this time is Kevin does push the boundaries. Like that's his thing.
He's got a bit of an attitude about him, isn't he?
And I think that because that's why he's so lovable in a way. I think is that memorable. Is that I feel like they're all aware of, it's just Kevin doing Kevin's thing again. He for some reason he's not necessarily a bad kid. He's not Bart Simpson, but I feel like he does. I feel like I think I don't know. I can sort of see it, and by now as well for me, like the Uncle Knobhead, the Peter Kay joke is almost like an archetype. Like I feel like there are a lot of those characters. Well, look what you did, you little jerk!
Yeah.
And it really, really resonates. I think that's just how the actor said it. I think it really resonates.
I think there's an element of real meanness, to it. It's not like Uncle Knobhead, is it?
I think that is what that is because on the plane as well when he says, "Hey,
I forgot my glasses."
Yeah, he is a twat.
Yeah, that's what I mean. My everlasting thing is he's a prick.
Yeah,
and
I forgot the bit about that little kid that his only role is for that one moment in that scene is so they count Kevin. Like they're counting everyone. They're like doing a register. The sort of old. Is she an older sister? Maybe.
Yes. Yeah.
She lines them all up to count them, and then just before that, there's a little kid from across the block who's
just asking everybody questions.
Yeah, I really like that bit, actually. When he's like, "How fast does it go?" And then he just the same sort of height as Kevin, so he gets counted. You assume as Kevin, and then no one else checks if they're all in. But I think it's a. I'd be interested to know if this has ever happened. There must be some articles in the Daily Mail about
there's articles about everything in the fucking Daily Mail. I tell you,
that's what I mean. Like a trash article about a kid left alone. Maybe not fighting burglars, but I can see it happening. I feel like, and they are an all right family.
I think it's done in such a way where, I think first and foremost we understand we're watching a Christmas family movie. So it's not, you can look at it with that lens, but you don't really need to. It's just, you're there to, have a laugh and enjoy a movie. But when I was watching those scenes where there was the kid just going around asking the airport taxi drivers, having not seen it for an awfully long time, I was going, how does he play into this? Because obviously he's given so much screen time that if you didn't know what was happening in this film and you were watching it blind, you'd be asking, well, how does he, and that's what I was doing. I was going, I can't remember how he fits into it. And then I was like, that's, yeah. Because then I thought, because there was a realisation when I went, he's actually wearing something awfully similar to what Kevin wears later on. I was like, there we go.
Yeah.
And obviously it's the start of that recurring... Well, no, not the start. It's a continuation of that recurring thing where everybody who drives in hits that statue over.
Yeah.
Which is such a tiny thing that is obviously a running gag, and you take that out of the film, it doesn't make any difference to it. But it's just one of those things where it's just a nice little running gag where it makes Home Alone its own kind of entity.
Yeah, I mean the pizza delivery boy is just great, and for some reason he's like when he smashes into that statue. Why are they all smashing into the statue? Then that's just like a running
I was trying to figure out why it is, because it's not like it doesn't come out. It's not like in a stupid place or anything. Because one on the other side, and nobody knocks into that one.
Is it because everyone's in a rush around Christmas?
Probably.
No one's thinking straight.
That's probably the most likely.
Yeah.
Everybody's just trying to get somewhere a bit quick, and obviously when they're leaving, you know.
Joe Pesci as the policeman though at the beginning's great. I think when he's just standing in the doorway, that's really.
And everybody's brushing him off, and everybody's just like, "Excuse me, is your mum in?" It's like, "This isn't my house," you know. That thing. It's just almost like. I mean, Joe Pesci in this, the casting of Joe Pesci, I think is genius, because at this point, Goodfellas would have just come out. We know him from Raging Bull, and amongst other things. We expect Joe Pesci to be effing and blinding, and I mentioned it in the intro about the funny guy thing. He's menacing, but here... He is obviously menacing enough for him to be believable in that role, but he's literally so funny. Yeah. And I think this was the sort of start of... Or actually, did Lethal Weapon... No. This was the start of seeing him in slightly more comedic roles. Because he was in this, then he was in My Cousin Vinny in 92, I think. And then he was in Lethal Weapon 3, where he started playing those more... or at least... more mainstream comedic roles, but he's just fantastic in this, and it's played really well opposite Daniel Stern, who plays Marv.
I mean, when do we first? They're robbing the other house across the road, aren't they? And the wet bandits.
We're the wet bandits. Yeah. It's like,
and he's like, "You're sick. You know that, Marv?
There's something wrong with you."
Yeah. I like that he sort of has.
He's a bit crazy, but like
like Joe Pesci has he has his own set of principles. So he thinks Marv's sick for
he may be robbing a house at Christmas and stealing kids' toys, but let's not ruin their house at the same time, you know. Whereas Marv, it's not even he's doing it maliciously; he's just doing it so they have a calling card.
He's just a fool that's just ended up being a criminal, and he's not. He's like. He could have been, he just fell into being a criminal.
He's the sort of character, if you asked people who knew him, he'd be like, he's got mixed up with the wrong crowd, but he means well.
Yeah,
that sums him up sort of, massively. And this film was something of a sensation when it came out in 1990. So it's older than us, but it feels very much like it's been a part of my life. Well, it has been for the whole of it, because it was out when I was born, but it feels very much like connected to me. So this was made on a budget of $18 million. In its opening weekend, it made back just over $17 million in its opening weekend. So you've already made back your budget, basically. Domestically, how much do you think it made?
I don't know, Ryan.
$285 million. Worldwide, $476 million. If we were to adjust that for inflation, its worldwide gross puts it into the billion-dollar films category.
Wow, okay, so it was massive.
I mean, it's up there with Avengers, Endgame, The Dark Knight, you know, all of those films, Avatar, and whatever you have, you know, for a family Christmas film is insane. Like, that is, like... So it really did astound me, the amount of money that this film made, and actually it astounded a lot of people in Hollywood as well. So much to the point where they coined the term to be Home Alone, which basically means that your box office revenue was impacted by Home Alone. So I think they postponed the release of Edward Scissorhands in 1990 by a couple of weeks, so that it wasn't as vastly affected by Home Alone. So that released in the middle of November, Edward Scissorhands beginning of December. So that tells you immediately when other films and other production, you know, people are going, we need to change a release date on a film, otherwise we're not going to make enough money, because this is a bit of a phenomenon. You know, I think it makes total sense in one way, but at the same time I still can't get my head around it, because family films like this don't tend to make that... In my head, yeah, family films like this don't tend to make that kind of money. Yes, they do well, but they don't make, you know, adjusted for inflation, over $1 billion.
Yeah, that is insane. It feels like there's something quite massively different with Home Alone to all the other sort of cheap shots at Christmas. Do you know what I mean? It feels
like something like Jingle All the Way, as we've done the episode on that last year and we mentioned it at the start. Similar components, big names involved, and it's still a film that I think a lot of kids would want to go and see, because I think with kids' films they don't actually have to be any good for them to be successful, because kids will just go and, generally speaking, watch films.
This movie just seems to capture the magic of, like, it's like, you know, it's all the things, like it's having a can of Coke next to a big Santa Claus, next to the Coca-Cola truck. Like this movie seems to capture the magic that, like, the John Lewis adverts have been trying to capture in their yearly adverts. Like, it has those moments of, like, where it really understands what our like blockbuster idea of Christmas is like.
It certainly has its finger on the pulse of what Christmas means to a lot of people.
It's like a good Christmas song compared to a bad Christmas song, isn't it? It's like
it's Wham's Last Christmas as opposed to... I'm trying to think of a bad Christmas song now.
It's because they just come and they go, don't they? Bad Christmas songs.
Yeah.
Actually, no, they don't. They come round every year.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, but that's true, actually.
Unfortunately, I now can't think of a bad Christmas song.
I don't have that many. I don't have much of a problem with Christmas songs, to be honest. I generally like them all, like...
I think you can get away with a lot more when something has Christmas attached to it, because people are automatically in a slightly better mood than perhaps they would be at any other time of the year.
Yeah.
It's a bit like if you ask somebody on their birthday to give you a £5, they're much more likely to do it. Yeah, it's my birthday, don't worry. You know, as opposed to any other day, they'd be like, well, what do you need that for? Not that I'm saying ask people for a £5 on their birthday, but people, generally speaking, if it's a good time of year for them, which for Christmas it is for a lot of people.
You know, like when this movie really sort of starts to give me the feels, and I kind of forgot why, like, because I think you take these ones for granted a bit, like, because when I was growing up a bit, my brother used to like Christmas movies a lot, and I'd always feel like I don't know, I couldn't always be bothered to watch the Home Alone, but then when it's on, you're very much invested. But it's like when, you know, the moment for me this time was when he just walks into the church, you know, Kevin on his own, and you know, he listens to the choir, and then he speaks to the old dude who he's been scared of the whole time.
It's a really kind of wholesome moment, isn't it?
It's so good, yeah, and I feel like I don't know. There is a real it sort of just tells us stuff that we know we should be doing at Christmas. Like, you should be nice to old people. You should be nice to them all year, but especially at Christmas. And you shouldn't. Don't judge a book by its cover. All those classic sort of things. But it really sort of it does those moments really well, doesn't it? And
without ever getting to the point where it feels preachy.
Yeah.
Because I'll be the first one to admit, if you try teaching me a lesson in a film, I will automatically push back against it because I don't like being preached to. But it never feels like that here. It feels very much like it's just telling you the story, and if you pick up on its morals, great. But actually, this story, it will. I think the word resonates. You're going to probably hear a lot in this episode because it does. We're in so many elements.
Do you think as well, maybe what Jim was getting at was that it didn't have John Williams in Jingle All the Way?
Well, that
I mean,
that's the thing. It almost immediately, when you put this film on, stick it in your DVD player, or if it's in the local cinema, whenever it's on, almost immediately, well, for me anyway, transported back to a particular time in a particular place because of that score. That score, I mean, John Williams, we know, is one of the greatest, movie score composers. Totally forgot the word.
He's one of the greatest movie scores.
He is the movie score.
Yeah.
One of the greatest composers. And the reason for that is because his music takes you on a journey emotionally, it fits very much here. What it does mean is you whenever I hear a John Williams score, I always play the John Williams game.
Oh, what ones it sound like?
Yeah, so if you listen to any John Williams score, as you're listening to it, try and hum in your head another John Williams score, and you can't do it. So if I was to say to you, right, Indiana Jones,
da, 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 da.
As you're doing that, try and think in your head Superman.
Well, that's insane.
It's impossible.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And that for me has always been, and that's sounds like I'm critiquing John Williams there, but I'm not. It's just because his things are so iconic, you can't picture anything else when you hear them, even though he's got so many iconic ones.
Yeah, fair.
And this is very much a similar thing here. I mean, his score for Home Alone sounds the most like the Harry Potter films. It has the same kind of sparkle to it. That's the word I'm going to use. And now you've done that, I can't imagine what this...
No. Yeah, you're right. I can't imagine the Home Alone.
So the Home Alone one is... But that sounds a little bit...
That's a famous track, isn't it? That's a famous church one. But that's a great thing, isn't it? That yeah, for me the pinnacle is, I really felt it when it's in the church, and yeah, it opens, doesn't it? And the house feels so Christmassy. Like Christina said when watching it that they have like a wrapping station in their bedroom. It's really sort of nice as well, isn't it? That he sleeps in the mum and dad's bed. You know what I mean? Like he's in the big bed.
I mean, we can. For a family film, there is a lot of character arc in there where initially, much like a lot of us would be, if we had the house to ourselves as a young kid, you're doing all the things that your parents or your carers or whoever tell you not to do. You're going straight for the junk food. You're going straight for the films you're not allowed to watch. You're going to play with the toys you're not allowed to play with. You're going to do all the things you shouldn't be doing. But then there are those moments where he kind of realises, actually, this isn't as great as I thought it would be. There's the point where he's in his mum and dad's bed and he's got the picture of them, and I think he starts saying, I did wish for it, but I don't want that anymore. I really hope you come back, or something to that effect. And I think that the film works because it has that light and shade. It's not just, and I think that's perhaps where the past two. So Lost in New York is still a pretty decent film. I don't think it's as good as the first one. But Home Alone 3, Home Alone 4, Home Alone 5, I think is what it's called. It might have a different name. They've all lost that. It's all become just, let's just top the craziest thing. Let's make something more crazy and more crazy and more crazy. And it kind of lost what made the first one really good, really.
I was just thinking as well, like, the fact that the movie just cuts between Kevin having fun, so getting a bit sad, going shopping, trying to defend the house from these burglars that he's sort of clocked because he's not a stupid kid. He kind of what he's got a little. He kind of knows these people are bad the moment he sees them. He has a bad feeling about the policeman, I think, or he sees them in the.
He sees the gold tooth, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And so he immediately clocks it, and it's just like a little kind of calling colour going, huh. And then later on, when he sees him in the van, he clocks it again, and he goes, that's strange. It's that realisation moment for him.
It's so dodgy when they're following him in the van, isn't it? Like now, it's like, oh god, like they are creepy.
It's also really funny, like when Kevin turns back around, and you've just got Joe Pesci just like looking everywhere in the van.
There's nothing going on down that street at all, is there?
It's the quietest street at Christmas you've ever seen.
Yeah. But yeah, the mum trying to get home story it's sort of, because all the stuff that happens, maybe say in Kevin's world, is all quite far fetched. Surely people would see him in a shop and it sort of tries to explain it all the little bits. When he's in a shop, they might sort of say there's an 8-year-old kid here on his own. So I don't know, but with the story of her just trying to come home is quite realistic, really, isn't it? Like she's having to go to these airports, no one's helping her at all and stuff like that, and she's just trying to get. It's kind of a bit like, oh god, it's a bit like that in airports and stuff. It's just rubbish.
Especially at Christmas time, where it's a bit crazy at the best of times, let alone when there's people trying to get home for Christmas. It's. I think a film like this is really does hinge on its lead character, and obviously Macaulay Culkin is probably the pinnacle of child actors. In his day, if you wanted a child actor, you got Macaulay Culkin.
Was he in stuff before this?
Yeah, he was in Uncle Buck.
Oh, okay. I never really.
I think that was his first film, was Uncle Buck, and then he went on to. He done My Girl. He done. I can't think it. One where he plays He plays a son who I think it's called The Young Son or The Son or something, or Mummy's Boy, something where he plays like a slightly sinister kid. But yeah, at one point in time, if you wanted a child actor and you had the money, you would go to Macaulay Culkin. He was, in the early 90s, about as big as it got for child actors. And there's a reason for that, because he's incredibly likeable. You can identify an awful lot with him. Like, he's wisecracking, but not to the point where he's just an annoying little kid. Obviously, to his cousins and to some of his family, he's that. But when he's in, he goes and buys the groceries, and the girl's like, are you here alone? And he's like, man, do you think I'd be here on my own? She's in the car. Do you really think I'd be walking around? That would never happen, and he talks his way kind of out of it. That doesn't happen if you have a slightly wooden, annoying little kid. You have to have a likeable kid in this role. Like, films, certain films for me have been ruined because the kids are annoying.
Which what?
I can't think any off the top of my head, so I can't back up my point there. But do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I feel like it's sometimes in series or something when they've got to me it's like an episode of like the X-Files when there's like one of the main characters is a kid and like, oh, I'll just skip that one.
Yeah.
Do you know, that's when it does it for me.
In series wise, it was like for a long time it was The Walking Dead when there was Carl.
Yeah.
He was an annoying kid. I'm just trying to think of some other things as well.
Not that people don't like Anakin, do they? From episode 1, I
think that was unfair. Admittedly, I think that was just.
I think he's got Macaulay Culkin energy. Actually, that's what I thought of when I was watching this movie.
I think what it was is I think it was just a lot of Star Wars fans, which I realise you're in that category.
But he actually was in. That's the kid from Jingle All the Way, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Jake something
Lloyd.
Jake Lloyd. Yeah. I think he just got unfairly. Macaulay Culkin could have had that if he was unfairly kind of. If
they put him in
a big franchise where people had a lot of expectations and weren't willing to, move from those expectations.
It's even harder to imagine Jake Lloyd. It'll be even harder to imagine Macaulay Culkin turned into Darth Vader than Jake Lloyd. To be fair,
I mean, he looks a little bit more like Hayden Christensen in some ways than Jake Lloyd. Similar shaped head. I know that sounds stupid.
I don't think he does. I
think it's just because
I
think it's just because he's got a similar shaped head to the Darth Vader mask.
Okay.
That's perhaps one of the most ridiculous things I've said on this podcast.
I mean, yeah. So when they start sizing up the house and stuff, I think it's great, isn't it? The chemistry between those two is like very like slapstick and like
very very much so. I think if you get that wrong, it doesn't quite land quite as well, and therefore the third act, when he starts setting all the traps and it becomes, essentially Die Hard for kids.
Yeah.
It doesn't quite land as well, and it doesn't quite become quite as memorable. The reason why it works when all of that stuff starts happening is because both of those actors play it perfectly. Particularly standing out Joe Pesci. When he gets his head set on fire, like just that image to me is just absolutely hilarious, and it's weird because. And this is a bit of a strange link, but to me it makes total sense because there was another kid that I used to watch a lot as a kid, which was... another film that I used to watch a lot as a kid was Matilda.
Yeah.
And that has a vertically challenged chap in there who's questionable morals, who gets an injury to his head. In that one, he gets his hat super glued to his head and all his hair comes off.
That's great, yeah.
So in my head I was like... Again, not really remembering every single detail about the film, having not watched it in a while. I was like, is it super glued to the head, or what is it? Oh no! And then when it happened, I was like, I remember now, and it's just one of those moments where, because we're not expecting to see Joe Pesci in that light.
No,
in the same year, he's perhaps one of the most menacing gangsters that you've ever seen. In cinema,
but growing up watching this, we would.
What do you mean? I'm a funny guy. Well, like I'm here to amuse you. What do you mean? I'm a funny guy.
But we wouldn't have watched it that way around. We'd have seen him as that funny character first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that tells you. I mean, not that you need to be convinced of the acting chops of Joe Pesci, but not everybody can do that.
Yeah.
You put somebody else in that role, it perhaps doesn't work. It becomes too scary.
The traps are also, they've. Maybe like the mob would actually be like calling up Kevin to get his sort of guerrilla tactics, because they're really brutal, aren't they? Like the nail, the doorknob is ridiculous actually, and it puts the M in his hand.
It's a little bit of the homage to the Indiana Jones in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where
I can't remember
the Gestapo guy. The medallion goes into the fire, and then the Gestapo gets it, and then he puts his hand into the snow as well.
Yeah.
So that is pretty much a almost direct, not copy, but a homage to that.
Yeah, fair.
To that sort of scene. Whether or not that was a conscious thing, I think there's too many similarities there for it not to be a conscious thing. But
the paint cans, the spider's really memorable, and at the moment that you sort
I have a thing with spiders anyway. But it's that thing of, because it doesn't happen immediately, the spider just goes away.
I think the one, it's great watching these good movies because, it actually make you laugh. When when you become a bit desensitized to bad films, don't you? Like in this day and age, like, but you know, like when Marv puts his head through like the cat flap or whatever, and then Kevin just shoots him with the pellet gun or whatever it is, and he goes, ah! That's just such a, that whole bit that really got me. This time.
I'm even laughing like as you're explaining it.
I'm probably not explaining it.
I mean, I did see a really funny video. Well, not a funny video, but it was just quite interesting. And it was basically like a doctor going through. I think it was on like Watch Mojo or one of those ones where they like an expert critiques that kind of thing in films, and he critiques like all of the injuries that you would sustain in Home Alone if that had actually happened, and it was like the paint one. I was like, yeah, that'd kill you.
Wow.
And then it's like the one where he steps on the nail. Yeah, that'd go straight through your foot. And it was just like, I mean, it could have quite easily turned very bad very quickly.
The iron as well, when he just pulls the light switch and it's the iron mark.
And the fact that it happens to him, because like Joe Pesci's ones are there's not a lot of stupidity involved in them, whereas with Marv's ones, it's a bit like
he kind of falls for him.
Yeah, he's just like, oh, what does this do? And then pulls it, and he goes. And then spends the time looking up rather than going, oh, something's coming down because I can hear it, you know. I think, yeah, everything is kind of just perfectly done for them. I think it's hard to put my finger on why, because it's not necessarily I think it's just really. I think it is just lightning in a bottle, and capturing the magic.
Well, I mean,
it either sometimes works or it doesn't work.
How do you think about the whole? One of the most iconic parts for me that I always remember, is this. It's me, Snakes. The whole movie. Is that
keep the change, you filthy animal?
The bit that I just can't. I mean, how did they think to put that in there? That's great. That's some serious genius filmmaking for me. Like, he watches it at the beginning, and then when his parents when he's just Mom, I'm eating junk food and watching stupid TV or whatever. Come stop me, that sort of thing. And then he uses it on the pizza guy, and then he uses it on them. It's so cool. I like that.
It is, and you see the escalation of it, because he does it to the pizza guy at the start, and the pizza guy goes running.
That's a great scene. That sort of reminds me of Back to the Future for some reason. He kind of reminds me of Marty McFly. No, George McFly, the pizza guy. When he runs away.
A bit of a goofball in that respect. Yeah, it's that's very, very funny, and you think that's the gag. You think that's it. And then he does it again later, but he just ups the ante by lighting the firecrackers in the saucepan, which obviously makes it sound even more like gun. Because you could have quite easily at that point go, oh yeah, if you're being really cynical, people could say, oh yeah, like he's going to think the gunshots on the TV are real gunshots. And by doing that again, but with the firecrackers, it's almost like going, well, we've now done it like this, so what's your excuse now if you think this is far-fetched? It's almost like a way of showing to the audience, we know what your criticisms of this may be, and we've already come up with a way of getting around those criticisms. And you mentioned, genius kind of writing, and it comes from John Hughes, who John Hughes is one of the great writers of teen films and films that go straight to a certain demographic. So he wrote films like Weird Science, The Breakfast Club. What's the other one? Pretty in Pink, I think he done. What's the other one? There's like a whole host of them. And now, why can I? Pretty in Pink. St. Elmo's Fire. There we go.
St. Elmo's Fire.
Yeah. I think he done that one as well. But so he done a whole host of those kind of teenage films, The Breakfast Club, St. Elmo's Fire, Pretty in Pink, that kind of element where it just captured a certain demographic really well. That's kind of where the Hollywood Brat Pack came from, with like Emilio Estevez, John Cryer, kind of in that sort of that frame there. Rob Lowe as well, and so he's a very, very good writer, and to take it into a family kind of film where you obviously haven't got the same kind of freedom as you would have with, say, a teenage film, where you'd be exploring different themes because your audience is slightly different, is a very difficult thing to do, but he manages to do it effortlessly. And it's one of those things where, how do you come up with that as you said, that keep the change, you filthy animal, that using that film in that way, and not only that, but then doing it again,
to ward off burglars,
leveling it up and going up a stage and escalating it and making it up in the ante almost. It just seems like that's where I think a lot of people watch a film and go, I could write this, I could do this, I could do that. When I watch a John Hughes film, I'm often going, I couldn't get anywhere near that level of writing.
And it's like how it's Marv that's obviously fooled by the... Is it Marv, by the way?
Marv, yeah. Marv is played by Daniel Stern, and Joe Pesci's character is Harry. So
it's Marv that's fooled by that, and I feel like the threat is very much real with Marv and Harry, isn't it? Like like when I was watching it with Christina, she said, I wonder what they were planning to do once they got him. Because at the beginning, I think they probably would have just burgled the house, and I think the worst they probably would do is tie him up. But then it comes to the end, and it's kind of a bit dark, isn't it? He's like, I think he might have just been trying to scare him. He's like, I'm going to bite each one of your fingers off. But he's also... You don't know.
It is also Joe Pesci.
Yeah, it seemed quite convincing that he might do that, and I feel like, the stakes are definitely real in this movie, aren't they?
They really are, and I think that's where the comparisons to Die Hard come from. In that, very quickly the stakes are kind of levelled, and central location. With one main character kind of fending off the bad guys. So that's where the comparisons come from. But I think it does it just as well as a film like Die Hard does, even without the gratuitous violence and the swearing or anything like that. You've got it all there, and I think that's just a proof that...
Also, what's he called in...
John McClane.
John McClane is he hasn't got... Because they've got weapons and stuff, but he's not... He kind of... He can't... He's not really in a position where he can be super creative with his, the way he just kills the villains, whereas Kevin has got this imagination where he can...
It's on his turf. It's his home.
Yeah. He's got all the stuff, and he has to think outside the box because he hasn't got a ho-ho-ho machine gun. Do you know what I mean? He's just got all the stuff laying around his house. And how rich is... Where's the money coming from?
I mean...
What do you reckon? Like, they are so rich. He's flying them all to... I forgot why they're going to Paris. It's some sort of... I can't quite remember.
I think they're going to visit his brother. So the father's brother.
Yeah, isn't it... Didn't they get that from some kind of... Is it something work related or something?
Possibly. I mean... There's good questions about how rich they are, because that house on that street is massive. And I know from an English perspective, houses are much bigger and much kind of more grand than they are over in England. But even so, like that, that's a big family. Like, I think there may even be like people who have made, because John Hurd, who plays the dad, plays Peter, he's in The Sopranos, and I think a lot of people like...
Oh, you think he's a gangster?
Yeah, a lot of people say it's like a bit like some people have said that Breaking Bad is a prequel to Malcolm in the Middle, whereby he goes into witness protection and becomes the dad in Malcolm in the Middle. And the reason he's such a bit of a wet blanket is because he has to be, because he was Heisenberg. And it's that kind of fan fiction linkage kind of thing. And I think it's a similar one here, where he's actually a massive gangster, and he may be out on like witness protect or something like that because he's in The Sopranos.
I mean, they all have big families, don't they?
Exactly, yeah. And you got Joe Pesci there. He could be a hired hitman.
Yeah, that's true.
You never know.
I feel like, and you know, yeah. What about the what's the neighbour called? You know, do we ever get his name? The shovel man.
So. I like that. Shovel Man. So he's called Marley, and he is played by Robert Blossom. Blossom, sorry.
He's great, isn't he? Like, because when you're young as well, he's definitely quite a scary character when you first meet him. I remember that. Do you remember that he's a bit of a scary character? Even if you've rewatched it,
I think even before there's the, you know, that sort of brief kind of explanation of he's like I can't remember, they call him something slasher or something, when Buzz is telling him, you know, oh, he's killed people and he keeps the bodies in that salt bin or whatever it is. But he's even creepy before that. Like, there is something about, like, maybe don't just stare at us like that and you might not. But as you say, that when you mention that scene later where he's in the church, that scene only hits a little bit harder because of how much, as a kid, we're probably quite scared of that character. I think if he's just the neighbour who's not that scary, but they've never spoken to, it may go some way to being a nice little wholesome moment. But I think it works even more because it's like this stark contrast. Oh, I actually thought you were really scary, but you're all right, you. Yeah. And, you know, when we have that full circle moment at the end where his family's there and he gives Kevin the wave, you know, it's like a full circle, nice, wholesome moment that I think is just made more powerful by the fact that at the start we thought he was a scary killer.
And he sees him in the shop, doesn't he, when he's buying the...
And that's what causes him to steal the toothbrush.
Yeah. I love that bit where he's... He gets chased, doesn't he? And he runs. He goes whoa, and he slides across the ice. But the bit I like is when he's like stolen the toothbrush, and he looks at it, he's walking home, and he's like, "I'm just a no good criminal."
Excuse me, you have to pay for that.
He's like, "I'm just a no good criminal. I'm just a common criminal." So you know the bit when he's walking down, and I think it might even cut to the criminals.
Yeah.
And it's like he's
like really kicking himself about it. Like, I think that's what makes us like him even more, is that it's not like he's I've stolen this, or how cool this is. He's actually like, he's got his morals in the right place. Yeah. He's just sometimes has made some bad choices, and, you know, has a little bit of a attitude about him. But even the whole thing prior to that, when he says, "Excuse me, ma'am, is this toothbrush endorsed by the American Dental Association?" And she's like, "Well, I don't know. I'd have to," you know. It's just like, that's where he gets that. You know, he's quite intelligent for his age. Like, it's believable that he does all of this stuff because of those moments.
They're all bratty. I just realised they're all bratty, including Kevin a bit. Like, they're all, because they're rich. You know, I mean, because they're all rich kids, and
this is pretty much a film about bad parenting.
But they're all like it. Like, and I'm not surprised that he's. You know, you can imagine he's been a bit annoying in the past as well, and they're all sort of, "Oh, Kevin," but it's like, you know, Buzz is like, he is like the character from Toy Story, isn't he? Like Sid.
Yeah, there's something about Buzz that I always was a bit like, watching it as a kid, I always I was scared of him, and I also hated him as well.
Yeah, I hated him.
You know, because it was like,
I know what you mean.
He made every time I watched him as a kid, he made me feel like shit. Yeah. Just because the way he was just like so horrible to Kevin. Like, he was the biggest. Like, the others just call him a bit of a name, call him names a little bit, and, you know. But he's like a little bit like mean. Like, he's like, "Oh, I've eaten your pizza. Oh, you can have it, but I will have to barf it back up." You know, it's just...
I wouldn't have you stay in my room if you were growing on my ass.
Yeah. just a detestable human being.
I think he's just a bit gross, isn't he?
Yeah, I think we all know somebody like that.
Yeah, we've all had, like, someone, like... at school you've gone round their house because your mum arranged it, and they're a bit like you're a bit scared of them, or it's like your friend's older brother. That's the sort of character I imagine.
He's got
a tarantula.
Your friend's older brother who is in like the year above or something, and has got a bit of a reputation for.
He's got a scooter, isn't he?
Yeah. Arsehole. That's all I can say. And I just want to have a little shout out to Rory Culkin, who played.
Christina's played that. He looks surprised the whole movie.
Yeah, and it is in this one, or is it in number 2? But there's definitely a point where, I think it's in this one where he says, "Oh, you'll be sleeping upstairs with," I can't remember his name, but with him. And obviously there's this running joke about how when he drinks too much, he wets the bed. And you just see him with a can of Coke and he looks over at him and then smiles. It's like, you're getting a weird kick out of this.
That's funny, yeah.
But it is such a funny moment. And I think even now it's even funnier because of what Rory Culkin has gone on to do in Succession.
Oh, that's him. I didn't clock that.
Yeah.
I've watched probably most of season 1, maybe the whole of season 1.
So anybody who's seen Succession knows the kind of character that Rory Culkin plays. I think it's even funnier knowing now that that's him. I think it's Rory, because I know there's 3 Culkins. I think it's Rory Culkin.
Hi, I'm Barry Wood, CEO, President and Visionary of Barry Wood's International Agency to the Stars. We're looking for the next Michael Kitchen or Felicity Kendall, and that could be you. Simply send a fax to 0224 stars, and before you know it, you could have the agent that puts the Raz into razzmatazz. I've worked with some of the finest performers in the country, from John Nettles to Jimmy Nail, Patsy Palmer to Beverly Callard. The list goes on. Soon that could be you, only with Barry Wood's International Agency to the Stars, where Hollywood meets Harrogate. I said to Nick Berry, stick with me, son, you'll be bigger than Peter Egan, and I defy anybody to tell me I'm wrong.
So we've mentioned obviously John Hughes as the writer and the producer, but this was directed by a guy called Chris Columbus, who has worked on such films such as Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Sorcerer's Stone if you are in America, which is actually going to be our next episode. I'm going to be doing that with Hannah, so tune in next time for that. He also directed the film version of Rent. He also directed Mrs. Doubtfire, which may be why there's this link that I have in my own memory to Home Alone and Mrs. Doubtfire without even realising it at the time. And obviously he was the writer for the script for The Goonies, which is another fantastic, film that has a lot of kids in there, that kids are cast well and aren't annoying. We have John Williams, as we mentioned earlier, as the composer of the music. I don't need to list off what he has done, because he has done pretty much everything of note. We have Julio Macat as the cinematographer, who went on to work on things like Wedding Crashers and Pitch Perfect. We have Raja Gosnell as the editor, worked on things like Never Been Kissed, Big Mama's House, Scooby-Doo, which is another film I used to watch a lot as a kid, the 2002 version of Scooby-Doo.
Is that Sarah Michelle Gellar in that?
Sarah Michelle Gellar.
I never got on board with that one. I don't know why. I never really cared.
I think I went to
see
see it for one of my birthdays, so I think I have a
fair. Good memory.
We have Janet Hershenson as the casting director, so she cast for When Harry Met Sally, and then went on to do Harry Potter and the Philosopher's / Sorcerer's Stone. We have Jane Jenkins as she was the casting director, I should say, another casting director worked on things like The Princess Bride.
Ooh.
Which is my name is Inigo Montoya, you killed my father, prepare to die, with Mandy Patinkin and Andre the Giant. So any little nods to wrestling that I can get in this podcast, I will get you there, don't you worry. A Few Good Men, Apollo 13 as well, as things she's worked on. And John Muto was the production designer who'd worked on things like Night of the Comet, Flowers in the Attic, and then subsequently Species, which I think is a great mid-90s.
Do like Species, yeah, it's a good one.
A lot of people don't know that there's 4 Species films.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I mean,
The first 2 are the best.
yeah,
The
fair.
third and fourth one are.
I didn't realise there were
straight to
5
DVD.
Home Alones, to be honest. I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I think the all three
Just
are all
cash in on
straight
it.
to DVD, cashing in on
Yeah.
there.
Home Alone 2 is pretty good, isn't it?
Lost in New York. It's a weird watch with everything going on with Donald Trump in
Oh,
the elections. You know, he has a bit of a cameo in that.
Yeah, I remember.
That stars Tim Curry, and I love Tim Curry. Tim Curry's again pretty decent in everything. So going through the cast list for the first Home Alone film, obviously Macaulay Culkin as Kevin. The film I was trying to remember earlier with Macaulay Culkin was The Good Son, where he plays a slightly sinister young chap. Joe Pesci as Harry. We have Daniel Stern playing Marv. We have John Hurd playing Peter. Robert Blossom as Marley, which is the old guy neighbour. Catherine O'Hara as Kate, or as I like to call her, Kevin's mum.
Yeah.
So Kevin's mum plays Kevin's mum, who's called Kate, which, if you'd have asked me before this episode, what's Kevin's mum called in Home Alone, I'd have said Kevin's mum. And finally we have John Candy as Gus Polinski and Jerry Bamham as Uncle Frank. So, and it's interesting with John Candy, he was only in it as a favour to John Hughes, basically, and all of his scenes he improvised the dialogue.
Oh, really? It does feel very genuine.
Yeah, John Candy has that kind of aura about him where he feels very much like the guy you could just have a chat to in a pub, you know, where he's got some cool stories and he's just a likeable fellow. A bit like he plays in Planes, Trains and Automobiles, which is another John Hughes film. You know, he's a likeable guy, you know.
I think I see it as well. Like, I think what I've just realised is I think I used to maybe see like John Candy in the yellow coats, like sort of signalling we're near the end of hit the time for the movie. You know, the moment they come in, it's like she's guaranteed to get home to Kevin, but up until then, it's like she can't really get home.
But he's like the saviour almost for her.
But I think I used to sort of, when that happened, maybe it made me feel that, oh, you know, this chaos is soon to be over. You know, maybe I just. And maybe as well, when it cuts that bit at that point, you're sort of, you know, like delaying the sort of tense action scenes or something. I don't know. They really stick with me, those yellow jackets. Like, it made me feel something when I was watching.
You've got a real problem with them, haven't you?
I think I like that they're all in the. He also asked her, so, "Oh, do you want to have a go or something?"
And he like shoves it in her face. And she's like, "No," and then she really has to like push it away from him.
It's such a. It didn't have to. It's kind of interesting. That's the way they wrote her to get home in this film. Do you think they just sort of didn't think about that too much? Like, it's quite random, isn't it?
It is a bit random, and it doesn't really have a whole.
It's a bit Planes, Trains and Automobiles.
I mean, it's written by the same dude, so it makes sense. But it doesn't have any other kind of, other than the fact that the fact that she gets home.
Yeah.
Doesn't really have any other bearing on the story, because as we know, the rest of the family get back about 5 seconds later, having getting on the plane she said she couldn't wait for.
Do you think there's an alternate ending where those yellow jackets carry out the sort of, they fight off the villains or something? I don't know.
Maybe. That would be quite funny. I mean, I'm surprised John Candy didn't have more screen time, because if you got a name like John Candy, you think you would have him in there a bit more.
It's a real change of pace. Just coming back to the sort of the tense scenes at the end where he's fighting off and he's done all the traps, and then he goes to the treehouse on the zip wire, but then he decides to run to the other house, doesn't he? And it's kind of cool because you see the devastation really that the wet bandits actually do. It's kind of pretty grim. isn't it? Like the house
Yeah,
is full
like,
of water.
Like anybody who's had their house flooded will tell you it's the worst kind of damage you can do.
Yeah.
So it's just a horrible thing, and it's just kind of glossed over. Like we see essentially him, swading through the basement of the neighbour's house of water and going upstairs. It's just all pouring down.
Yeah.
And that's
I feel, and at this point, the Marley has clocked what's going on because it's chaos. So
the fact that nobody has up to that point is a bit of a concern.
He's clocked it, and then it's the whole end sequence is so satisfying, isn't it? All the way up to the shovel. How do you feel though about the actual end when the family come back? Because I think the final, it's all very satisfying up to that point, but then what made me laugh watching it is that she says hi to Kevin. They have this really nice moment where he runs downstairs, but then literally all the family come back, and literally 2 minutes later he's on his own again, and they're all doing something in another room.
Well, I mean, it's even weirder when you watch it back to back with the second one.
Why is that?
Because you have this wholesome moment of oh yes, his mum's got back to him, and they're having a tender moment together. Family come back and it's all happy, and in the start of the second one the same shit happens again, where there's a scene in the second one where he's singing in the choir and Buzz is behind him pulling faces, and everybody in this massive audience at this school choir performance is laughing at him, is just totally laughing at Kevin. And it all happens again, and it's just so did that mean nothing to you? I think it's a strange one, because I think it needs to have that moment where he looks across to the old man, because I think that's a real strangely that actually. I don't know what it is, but as I've got older, I've got a little bit more emotional when I've started watching when I watch films, and so I didn't.
Did the old man bit get you at the end? Where
It got me a little bit. It was quite a nice sort of moment where I was kind of
that is good, that bit.
Yeah, if I was having a bad day, tears would have flowed, but then not quite here. But
quickly, tears turn to hate, because afterwards it's like, Kevin, what did you do to my room?
Yeah, it's fucking Buzz. I think that. I like the ending. I think it does what it needs to do.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything else you kind of needed. I think the danger it would have done, like I was saying earlier, is that it then could have gotten a little bit preachy if it had been oh, we're so sorry we left you. Oh, we didn't mean it. Da 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 da. I think it would have been a bit sort of almost a total 180 from where we were, where it might have felt a little bit.
It's a bit like
non-genuine.
Kevin's gone through all that stuff, and then he's aware of it, and the neighbour's aware of it, and maybe that's just enough. It's like Lord of the Rings, when they return to the Shire, they've literally taken the ring to Mount Doom, and they've been through loads of crazy stuff. There's been wars fought. There's been they've had to almost getting totally killed by weird orcs and stuff. And they've literally saved the world. Then they come back to the Shire and no one really cares, because they're just living out their normal life in the Shire. I feel do they find out in the second one that Kevin fought off a load of? Is it a dress? Do they find out that he?
No, very quickly just happens again.
Okay,
almost beat for beat happens again.
Yeah.
They play on it a little bit, because they go to counting and go, Kevin, and he then pops around from the front of the minivan and goes, I'm here, I've got my ticket, don't worry.
Does Home Alone 2 is it a great movie? I feel like
I did fall asleep in the second half of it, because I wasn't feeling too well.
Okay.
I don't think I'd ever seen it. Even now, I still don't think I've seen it in its entirety. I think I'm just happy with Home Alone 1, and you know what I mean. I don't need necessarily any more than what I've got.
We watched Lost World the other day, and I think I'm kind of happy with Jurassic Park 1.
Yeah.
There's a couple of scenes that it's probably the same with Home Alone. There's a couple of scenes you probably really want to see in Home Alone 2, or like get the vibe for it. But
I think there's an appeal there for it, but it's not necessarily something I've ever rushed to see. Hence why I haven't. But interestingly, I do just want to get on to kind of like critics' reception, because so critically, this hasn't been received quite as well as I thought it would have been. You know, I thought this would be one where people hold up, like a lot of the fans and like myself do, hold up as one of the ultimate Christmas movies. And if we look at, Rotten Tomatoes, which isn't the be-all and end-all, but it has a 66% tomato meter for critics rating. And that got me thinking, and I was like, that's strange. I looked at Metascore, 63 for critics score there. So then the kind of perhaps most well-known movie critic, certainly of yesteryear, is a guy called Roger Ebert. So I just went and had a look and see what he said about the film. And here's what he said. And I don't agree with this in the slightest. If Home Alone had limited itself to the things that might possibly happen to a forgotten 8-year-old, I think I would have liked it more. What I didn't enjoy was the subplot involving the burglars, who are immediately spotted by little Kevin and made the targets of his cleverness. The plot is so implausible that it makes it hard for us to really care about the plight of the kid. What works in the other direction, however, and almost carries the day, is the gifted performance of young Macaulay Culkin as Kevin. And I cannot get my head around that, because what he is saying is...
The burgling's a subplot.
Like, that to me just says 100% you don't get it. Like, I'd hate using that phrase because it doesn't really mean anything. But the burglars are not the subplot. That is very much part of the main plot. Yeah. It's very much...
It's Kevin versus the burglars.
It's the danger of him being left at home alone.
The subplot is her journey home, surely. That's a subplot.
Yeah, the subplot is John Candy.
Yeah.
And, because there's no...
three main characters.
There's no peril, really. He's not unsafe, he's not in... I mean, he is, in the terms of he's an 8-year-old child, but we never really see him in danger, other than when the burglars are there. So that's kind of the whole point, and I cannot fathom. And for the most part, Roger Ebert is quite a consistent film critic. A lot of his critically reviewed films are in line with pretty much what the audience are thinking as a whole, which is unusual for critics, because critics usually have a bit of a different view on things. But I can't, this is such a film where he's basically saying that he would get rid of the burglars from Home Alone. And I guarantee you, for the most part, if you ask people, what do you remember the most about Home Alone, it would be all of the stuff with the burglars.
Do you know how when that was he did?
So that was obviously at time of release.
I just wonder though if we were like his age and we went to the cinema. Obviously, he's a movie critic, but even if just average Joe went to cinema, went to watch it by himself or something, in their 30s or 40s or 50s, I don't know, you'll go to watch Home Alone, and then you watch it, and then you're sort of you're sitting there, and then you're trying to sort of pick holes in it. Like, I don't really see why it needed the burglars. I was kind of interested in what, and I think for us it's so different because we watched it very much from the just by the fact that I thought the furnace, I didn't think he was imagining that. I thought it was just
there is something to be said about identifying with a certain time in which you watched a film.
Yeah.
So obviously I totally understand that we watch this film as kids, and so therefore our view of the film is very much from a kid's
nostalgia.
From a kid's viewpoint and from a nostalgia viewpoint. And I think it all depends on when you see that film. Like I think I spoke about, steady on, son. There's no need to start kicking off. I think I spoke about this in the Jingle All the Way episode last year with Jim, whereby I said I watched that as a kid, and that for me has fond memories, and perhaps that's why he doesn't identify with it, because he'd never seen it. And I get there's an element of that there. However, I do think there are some films that kind of transcend that, and this is definitely one of them.
And it's also kind of obvious to something must, maybe he was ill that week or something, because it's kind of obvious to me that
maybe he
why
did have
would you
a
remove
bad
the
week.
burglars?
Yeah,
what they're like that is like you say, when you come away from that film, you don't be like, oh, the burglar bit was a bit weird, but I enjoyed the bit where he was like making the pasta and stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit like going, oh yeah, the Titanic. I didn't really like the bit where the boat sunk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like that's kind of what
Or
you're
the
there
thing.
for.
It's like, I would have liked to find out more about the research they were doing in the thing,
Yeah.
and not cared about like that monster thing.
Yeah, it's just or like
The monster
good
stuff.
fellas. I didn't really like all that stuff with the gangsters.
Yeah.
I mean,
Didn't like all that killing.
yeah. For me, a barometer sometimes of how good a film is, depending on, we spoke about this earlier, is I often relate it back to my dad. So my dad, generally speaking, is quite set in his ways with the sorts of films he watches. It's a bit of a running joke in our family, whereby it's either World War II black and white, or it's about cars set in the past, that kind of thing. And, let's say I sat him down and, the last episode we done, that was released a couple of weeks ago on The Thing, if I sat him down and we said, what do you think of that? He would say the common phrase that I've heard throughout my childhood is, it's one of them fucking weird ones, that. Whereas I think he'd sit down and watch Home Alone and go, yeah, I'll tell you what, for a kid's film, that's not bad, that.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes I use my dad as a bit of a barometer of how good a film is. Not all the time, because he's not... he's not a proven, litmus test of these things. But I think when it's something where, it must be good, because even my dad likes that film.
Yeah.
And it's not set in the war and it's not in black and white, which is a running joke in our house. So, as I say, still really surprised that critically it didn't get, amazing scores like it absolutely deserves. And I don't really know why that is, because John Hughes is, by that point, was a guy that everybody was raving about. When you go from film, The Breakfast Club, for example, is very much a film that so many teenagers, I think, can identify with. Let's take me, for example. I identify with that film so much, even though it's about kids in high school in the US. So I don't really, we don't play football over here like they do, but we can identify with, that feeling of one of the characters. And I think here that, he's got that same thing where we can identify with Kevin so much.
Yeah, I think it's there for people that just want to see it. I mean, it's that sort of all laid there. It's sort of sentimental. It's funny. It's like the jokes land, which watching in films this day and age, like sometimes in these films you can watch like there could be like on a good day it's like 7 out of 10 jokes hit the mark and they're actually funny, whereas this one there's no bit where you're like, oh, that was a bit awkward, like sort of comments you have when you watch films now is, oh, there's a bit of an awkward moment on that scene, wasn't it? So, oh yeah, but generally it was all right or something. But
yeah, I know what you mean.
This film, it kind of everything sort of lines up, and I don't think there's any weird standout parts. That it kind of just, it's a sentimental Christmas movie with high stakes and high octane action really at the end. I think it's great, and
above all else it's fun.
Yeah,
I think at Christmas time people, I know It's a Wonderful Life is a bit of an emotional one and takes people on a that emotional roller coaster, but this one is one that you can put on and it is just fun. You don't have to you don't have to pick up on the morals of the story. You can just sit there and watch it and go, oh, let's watch that bit where Kevin puts tar on the stairs and then Marv goes on it and it, steps on the nail. That's really funny. Let's watch a bit where he gets the iron fall on his head. You can do all of that. Even and you made a very good point just a second ago where you said, if you got 10 jokes on a page, 7 of them land. I think on a bit of a diversion, so Ray Butt, who's the producer of a UK sitcom called Only Fools and Horses, which is, in my eyes, the best sitcom ever written, he said that on most sitcoms and most comedies, on a page you might have 3 jokes, 2 of them will land. With Only Fools and Horses, and I think can apply to a lot of great scripts, he had 10 jokes on them, all of them landed, all of them meant something, and in some cases here, I'm finding myself going, if that had happened in a different film, I think I wouldn't have liked that. So like when he puts the aftershave on his face, the first time I'd be like, that's pretty funny. And the second time, usually I'd be going, well, we've seen that now. We don't need to see that again. But for some reason, and I think it's down to the writing, the likeability of Macaulay Culkin, the way it's shot, and the general feeling of the film, that I go, that's still funny.
I think as well because he's developed. Why that's funny to me is he's developing a routine. Like he's trying to act like an adult. Like he's waking up every day, he's putting aftershave on or whatever, and then the next day he's doing the same thing. Like trying to develop. He's trying to be the man of the house almost. I think
because
that's
he's a kid, he hasn't learned that hurts.
Yeah, I think it all kind of works for me, and what's sort of nice is that you rewatch it now and you're like, oh yeah, it is actually really good, isn't it? And I see why everyone used to always want to watch that all the time. It's actually nice to come back to something. It's like, oh yeah, it is actually just as good as it was then.
Yeah, because sometimes you can go back to something and go, actually, that is shocking now.
Yeah,
I thought that used to be really good, and actually, it's terrible.
Because to be fair, as much as I love Jingle All the Way, going back to watch it now, I'm a little bit like, oh, okay, I'm a bit bored in this section or something.
That was a prime example of there's 3 jokes on a page, 2 of them land.
Yeah.
That's a prime example of that. And I don't hold those in the same stratosphere. Jingle All the Way is still a fun film for me and I still like it. But I'm no way, and I even said it in the episode, you can literally go back and listen to it in case you think I'm saying otherwise. It's not at Home Alone's level. No. Home Alone is for me the standard of Christmas movies. If you want to be a good Christmas movie, you've got to get up to that standard.
For me, I don't think you can really ever achieve it, because for me it's very much like it's a can of Coke by the Coke truck kind of Christmas movie. And I feel like we're not in that. I don't think Hollywood can ever make that again, because they'd just be rehashing old stuff. I think this is it, and it's downhill from here until Hollywood is no longer. Hollywood has made this. I think this is the best Christmas. It sounds ridiculous, but
it's interesting.
I think this is it. That's it. That's the movie.
Well, it's interesting you said that it couldn't be remade, because apparently there was discussions for it to be remade, but the reason it didn't get remade is because in today's world the film would end because he'd just call them on his mobile, on his cell phone, and you think that's actually so true, isn't it? Like, films only work sometimes based on the time that they're made, because technology advances and you just go, well, I'll just give them a call then. And then if you were to remake it now, you'd have to have some shoehorned in horrible thing where it's my chargers don't work, or my phone's broken, I've smashed my phone.
Even the main sentiments of it, I just don't know if they would land now. Like, I don't know if like the scenes with the old guy in the church would really hit the spot anymore. It still does now when you watch this film, but for some reason I feel like sometimes these films just become a bit of a time capsule, and although this film is timeless, it still is. It's like Hollywood at a specific time. It's a time when child actors, it didn't all come out that they'll all get really messed up when they get older. Like it's like a.
Well, I mean,
not talking about Macaulay Culkin here. I think.
Well, it was at a time where information wasn't readily accessible, so unless you brought the magazines of the time, and you were really, for the average viewer, you probably saw him in a film.
That's it.
And that was it. And then you may see him in another film, and then it's that guy, it's that kid from that film. So I kind of get that. Moving on, shall we go to the staple of the podcast where we look at some would-be potential castings?
Yeah, go for it.
So in the role of Uncle Frank, we could have had Fraser Crane himself, Kelsey Grammer.
Oh, that would have been good.
I would have liked that, although it would have just been a little bit Fraser Crane, I think. I can hear him going, after Kevin says something, "I'm wounded," like he does in Frasier. For the role of Harry, which is obviously Joe Pesci's character, we could have had Robert De Niro.
So that would have probably been fine.
That would have worked just as well.
In like Meet the Parents.
He plays it well. Analyse this, analyse that.
I feel like that is I think that would have been all right.
I think at the time, it would have been fine, because I think, as I said, the reason why Joe Pesci works is because we don't expect to see him play those kinds of characters, because we know him as being gangsters and hard hitting characters. So in the role of Peter McCallister, so that's John Hurt, the father, I've got a whole host of names here.
Whole host? I thought you were going to say Hulk Hogan.
I'm now in.
To be fair, how funny would that be? She'd be like, it's like he's this wrestler guy that's made a massive. They got a massive house.
Well, let me tell you something, brother.
I'm going to stay with the kids.
I've now got endless Hulk Hogan promos going through my head. But no, Hulk Hogan was not considered for this.
No.
And to be fair, I don't know how many of these were considered, but these were just names that were in the pipeline, were in the talk. So Michael Douglas. That works. That could
I feel like whoever plays this character doesn't.
He's not got a lot to work with, so it's not too much of a jump, isn't it? But we've got Michael Douglas, Kevin Costner, Martin Sheen, Dan Aykroyd, which is so far is probably the most believable. You could see Dan Aykroyd there, worked with that kind of host of characters, not Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
Because I said a whole host, Charles Grodin, John Travolta, Nathan Lane, Tom Skerritt, Bill Murray, Jim Belushi, Chevy Chase, Harrison Ford, Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks wouldn't have been old enough at this point, I don't think. He'd only 2 years away from being in Big. So I don't think that would have worked. Sean Penn, don't think that would have worked. Mel Gibson, which at this point
it would have been fine, wouldn't it?
Would have been fine, but I think he's too big. No disrespect to John Hurt. I think if you're going to have Mel Gibson in a film,
give him some more stuff to do.
Yeah, essentially, make sure that his fee is.
I feel like you could have gave him the character and been like, he doesn't really care, or something like he's like always on business calls. That's if Mel Gibson
essentially
was in it,
Arnold Schwarzenegger in Jingle All the Way.
Yeah, that's the character. Yeah.
Sly Stallone. That would have been interesting. Christopher Lloyd. I could see Christopher Lloyd.
Okay, yeah.
More as Uncle Frank.
Yeah, fair. That makes sense.
Rick Moranis. Rick Moranis, I think, would have. I could never believe that Rick Moranis would forget his son.
No.
I think he just seems so likeable. Dennis Quaid, Jack Nicholson, which would have been really sinister. I think I could see him perhaps playing one of the burglars, but not playing Kevin's dad.
I don't know. I think he could play. I
mean, Jack Nicholson is very talented, but Jack Nicholson always seems to play those kind of edgy kind of. John Goodman, that I can see. Robin Williams, Mark Lynn-Baker, Steve Martin, Alan Thicke, Bruce Willis, Tony Danza, Dave Thomas, Robert Hayes, John Ritter, Ed O'Neill, Jeff Daniels, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And interestingly, I think this is the film that made Arnold Schwarzenegger want to do a family film
Yeah, fair.
because he saw the success of Home Alone. I think he was in talks with Chris Columbus, who also wrote Jingle All the Way or produced it.
I would have preferred to see him as Marv or someone. You know, like, I would prefer to see Arnold Schwarzenegger as one of the criminals.
Yeah, I bite your fingers off and feed them to you. I can see that quite easily. But John Hurd was cast because Chris Columbus liked his work in Cutter's Way.
Okay, fair.
So there you go. In the role of Harry Lime, so this is the
Criminal.
Which we've got his surname, which I don't think is explored in the film. We could have had John Lovitz. In the role of the Santa Claus, could have had Chris Farley.
The Santa Claus is great in this, isn't he?
Yeah,
In that banged up old car. I think it's little elements like that make me enjoy this film more. Like now as an adult, like it's like, can I ask you something? He's like, yeah, I'm just, Santa Claus just packing up, and he's in that beating up.
I
car.
think it's one of those things actually where so many films could have so many bits that are throwaway.
Yeah.
That we're just doing this just to get there, or we're just doing this, we're just doing that. But it feels like every single scene here has attention spent on it. It has its, it's been given time. It doesn't feel like we're just doing this because it's in the script, or we're just doing this to get to there. And I think, Santa Claus is an example of that, because you could have quite easily gone, what? Okay, we can cut that scene.
Yeah.
That doesn't need to be in there. It doesn't really, other than the fact he's asking Santa Claus to bring his parents back. We could have just had him do that, at home, like he's praying or something like that. So, and then a couple of other names for the role of Harry. Could have had Phil Collins,
Okay.
who has done some acting work in things like Buster and a couple of other things. Dudley Moore, an old British comedy actor. Rowan Atkinson.
That would have been different.
That would have been it would have been good, but in a completely different way. That would have been like, you could have had Harry completely mute. He wouldn't need to have said anything because of his work in Mr. Bean.
Yeah.
You could have done that and had it, but not be Mr. Bean, but still be just as good. In the role of Marv, Christopher Lloyd, who was also considered for Peter. He turned down the role of Marv.
Yeah, I feel like he would be. I don't know. I'm glad he turned that down. I feel like he would have been good. I wouldn't have minded him as Harry.
Yeah, I mean, Christopher Lloyd, he's in a film called Dennis, where he plays quite a horrible kind of sketchy character, which is another film I used to watch as a kid. So a lot of this podcast is just naming films I used to watch as a kid. So I can see it.
Yeah.
But I think post Back to the Future, I think at that point, 5 years later, and I think Back to the Future 3 was just about to come out, or was just being made, it's very easy to kind of go, Doc Brown, and then all of a sudden, and it not help the character, because whereas Joe Pesci, you're going, it's, what's his name from Goodfellas, that helps you because you don't expect him to see the stuff that he does.
Oh, sorry, Doc as Harry.
As Marv,
Oh,
the other
yeah.
one.
Oh, Marv, yeah. No, I can see him as Harry, but not Marv, yeah.
And then in the role of Buzz, we could have had River Phoenix.
Okay, yeah.
Or Keanu Reeves.
I feel like they picked a really good actor for Buzz. He's more unlikable.
Yeah, I mean, as a portly gentleman myself, I think it helps that he looks a bit. It's going to sound really horrible. He looks a bit gross.
Yeah.
His haircut is a little bit kind of. It's a little bit.
Yeah.
He looks a bit spotty in places. It kind of helps that he looks the way he looks for that character. To be fair,
I think River Phoenix as a kid looked a bit like him. Not. He was. I feel like River Phoenix would make more sense than Keanu.
River Phoenix, he'd just been coming off doing Last Crusade. And,
really?
Yeah, he plays young Indiana Jones in the Last Crusade.
Sorry, I thought he was when he was a real young kid in that train one, or the one with the train tracks.
Stand By Me, that's early 80s.
Yeah, okay, yeah. So in that, he looks like he could have been a Buzz. But not. I mean, he's really. I guess they would have made him more like. You would have believed more that he was into girls and stuff.
Yeah. He'd have been. Yeah,
I
but
doubt
a
he
bit of
would
a
have had a
smooth
pet.
talker.
You can't imagine him having a pet tarantula as much as that other Buzz, though.
Yeah. Always interesting when you look at who could have played the characters in the film. And on the whole, as I say, there's a lot of kids in this movie. Okay, the main one is right, but I think everybody else is cast really well.
Yeah, it's great.
Buzz is perfectly cast. Macaulay Culkin as the slightly oddball kid who wets himself is cast.
The sisters are funny, and
the one who says, what you would be in French, le heart le content, or whatever she says. You know, she seems a little bit up herself.
She's
a little
great.
bit,
yeah,
and it works perfectly. The one who counts them, she seems like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can see her having a conversation, saying something like, I can go out on my own, I'm 15 now.
Yeah.
And then they go, well, actually, do you remember when you counted Kevin at the on holiday and he didn't come with us because you counted wrong? I can see that. The ginger kid. What does he say to Kevin? I can't remember what he says. Oh, you know what? You're just like a disease.
You well remembered.
Yeah.
They really that bit where he remembers them all and they all really cut.
Yeah. And what's nice about that is that they've obviously filmed them saying that again.
Yeah.
Because you can tell it's different from. It's almost like you can see that's how he remembered it, rather than how it actually happened. And when you're a kid, you do kind of remember things like, oh, when you said that, it was really horrible.
Yeah, I remember a teacher shouting at me, bothering me for months. You know what I mean? And you remember it in a really scary sort of horrible
You kind of
way.
go, oh, and it's like if you were to somehow watch a video of your life and you watched it back, you'd be like, oh, it wasn't actually that bad. Do you know what I mean? But in your head, it's like the worst thing ever.
Yeah, of course.
And I think those. I think that the thing I said to Hannah when I was watching this, like within the first 20 minutes, was this film is anxiety inducing. Like the fact that there's so many kids running around the house at the start, I'm just like going, that's literally making my head spin a little bit, because it's like
even the running through the airport.
Yeah,
because I've run
literally
to the
even like dinner time.
Yeah,
it's like there's too many cooks.
Yeah,
not in a literal sense, but there's too many cooks in the kitchen. And then the drink spills over, and I'm just like, almost to a point where you're just like, okay, I need to get past this scene. And again, that goes back to the writing, and that goes back to the way it was directed. And Chris Columbus has kind of built up a name for himself, and this is one of the films that kind of really started that trend of really doing kids/family films really well, because I think it is such a niche market whereby I said earlier that kids will kind of watch anything to some extent, but obviously you're not necessarily, if you're seeing it in the cinema, you're going to be accompanied by an adult. So you need to have enough of childlikeness in a film to appeal to that audience. At the same time, you also need to kind of appeal to the parents who are watching it with them, because in not every situation are you going to get a parent going, I'm going to take you to see that film because you like it, I hate it. Obviously many parents do that, but I know if I had a child and they were like, oh, I want to go and see this, and I was like, I literally hate that film, I'm not taking you to see that. Let's go and watch this film, which is just as good and better than that, and actually I enjoy that. So it is a difficult medium. I think it can initially look like anybody can do it because you're appealing for the most part to children, but actually it's a real skill that I don't think sometimes Hollywood kind of takes credit for, if you know what I mean. Like, other than sort of animation films, you don't really hear that many big family
You're right. It's always animated ones, isn't
big
it?
family kids
Yeah.
films that win big at the Oscars, or
Yeah.
you know, do you know what I mean? It's usually.
I think you mentioned one earlier, like Matilda's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Danny DeVito would have been good, isn't he, as Harry?
It's it's interchangeable. You could quite easily put Danny DeVito in there, and it would be just as good. You know, I think they're. You know, I think that works just as well as well. You know, and I think much like Matilda has there, you know, this is going to be a bit of a bad pun, but there's a certain magic to Home Alone that I don't. As much as I'm interested in film, and I think there will be people who study film who will even be going, I know how to do all of this. I know how to film a shot. I know how to do all of this. Still can't quite put my finger on why this works so well, because I think it is just a product of its time, a product of everything just aligning to some extent because of luck and right place, right time. That just means it works on almost every level.
Yeah, I agree, for sure.
So let's move on quite nicely and swiftly to further watching. So I'll let you kick off some further
We've
watching.
already just said it, I think. the Jingle All the Way was the one I also used to like. And I think just because of the tenseness, I mean, because, you know, in the background of Home Alone, there's the mum plot trying to get home. And I feel like Jingle All the Way is just all that mum plot. Do you know what I mean? It's like
is, yeah.
it's not focusing
yeah.
on Jamie too much, the kid who just wants the toy, and and that sort of world. It's just from the perspective of, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger just has to find his kid the right toy, and you know, it's that sort of. To me, that has a bit of that sort of Christmassy, sort of festive feeling, magic in it. I don't know. I mean, for me, just the one that comes to mind is Richie Rich. You know, but I wouldn't really say go watch all the Macaulay Culkin movies. But I think they're the ones I imagine all together, like that, and that. You know.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, Richie Rich is a bit of a blast from the past. Like, that is a Sunday afternoon film, if ever I heard one. I've again got vague memories of, like, when I was growing up, it seemed to be that every weekend my mum and dad would take us to, like, B&Q because they were, like, redecorating or something. And getting home at, like, 3 o'clock after being out at B&Q or Home Base or endless, you know, hardware stores and places like that, coming home and the TV being on and my dad just putting on ITV or BBC and it being like Richie Rich or something similar. So that's a blast from the past. For me, obviously Home Alone 2, I think, is the only other one you would want to watch from that franchise, if you can even call that a franchise. I mentioned earlier Mrs. Doubtfire. I think that's a very similar film that has a lot of the same quirks about it. My Cousin Vinny, if you want to see a bit more of Joe Pesci in a lighter comedic role, same thing with Lethal Weapon 3, which is a bit of a strange film to suggest after Home Alone. But if you want to see Joe Pesci in a lighter comedic role, that's kind of where you want to go. Uncle Buck as well.
Yeah, that's good.
That's a good one to look at. And finally, The Breakfast Club, another John Hughes classic.
Now, you could be forgiven for thinking you're listening to a Spaniard ordering a beer on the Costa del Sol. You can almost feel the sun beating down on his bullfighting cape. But what you were actually listening to was me, Sean Connery, displaying just one of the many accents that you too can master at the Sean Connery Dialect School for Actors. Now let me transport you to a Cold War era Russian submarine with flawless Russian dialect. This is my boat now, Captain Phillips. That was magic. You can learn this and many more at the Sean Connery Dialect School for Actors. Here endeth the lesson.
Unfortunately, it's come to that time in the episode where we have to say goodbye. We hope you've enjoyed the episode as much as we've enjoyed recording it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to wherever you get your podcasts from, and also head over to our social media platforms to stay up to date. We thank you for listening to Jimmy Murphy, Simon Keet and Ryan Etherington. Together, we are Bury Our Bones with Cinema, and we wish you a very happy holiday season. And it will be a one-button job. Boom, 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 toom, toom, toom.
I have a terrible tendency to just swear about if you're talking, when we're doing it, I still find it slightly distracting.
It's a bit weird, but I think it's a bit weird, but I suppose...
Maybe if you listen to it back, see if it sounds... I was like, I'm going to have to stop it. You listen to it back,
It's a good job I observed that well, wasn't it?
Christmas movies.
And Christmas is here. Christmas, everybody sing.